The Appropriations Subcommittee on Commerce, Justice, and Science will come to order. Before we begin, I wonder if I could take a moment, General Bolden, to recognize and thank Mike Ringler, who's been our chief clerk on the committee for many, many years, and to Rock of Gibraltar for all of us. And real privilege, Mike, for us to work with you, for me to work with you. You've taught us all so much, and we're going to miss you. And you've served the country and this committee so well. We're really genuinely going to miss you, and I wish you all the best. Thank you for everything you've done for the country and the Congress and this committee. Really means I mean it. Thank you. Thank you. We're going to miss you. And I understand.
The Chairman would yield. Let me also add that it's been an absolute pleasure with you, and we've gotten a lot done together to help a great many people. So thank you, and I wish you well. I understand you found the perfect place in the perfect state to pursue further career activities. Thank you.
He got back to Pennsylvania as soon as he could.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to add my words. Mike, you've been a real gentleman and fair, and to me that word is very, very important, fair, balanced. Unlike a TV station, you've really been balanced, and I appreciate that, and I wish you all the best. And you know, we keep losing good people, and other people keep gaining good people, and so good luck. And am I supposed to say go Yankees, or that upsets you? Okay, go. Congratulations.
Well, today's also significant because Bob Bonner's today is 20th, I believe, anniversary of helping in the minority with the minority staff. And it's a real tribute to both of you guys. Yeah.
And I think it's important that you single him out also, because he's going to have a long suffering season with the Phillies. So, you know, it's going to be very painful for Bob.
Well, we've always had a bipartisan bill and tremendous cooperation and support on the committee. It's a tribute to both you guys and great work that you've done. But also, it's a real privilege for us all to work together on such noble good causes as NASA and law enforcement and scientific research and keeping the United States at the cutting edge. It's something all of us on this subcommittee share a passion for, and you guys have been essential to its success, and we really appreciate it. And I, in fact, when I was asked to serve on the Appropriations Committee back in December of 2002, going into my second term, I was at a dinner with Tom DeLay, who was my neighbor to the south. He was becoming majority leader, stepping off, and he said, "I'll give up my seat on Appropriations if you'll take it." And I was reluctant. I don't like to spend money if I can avoid it. I said, unless it's science or NASA or national defense, the answer is probably no, and he said, "You're hired." It's been a great assignment. I asked to serve on this subcommittee so that I could be here to help the National Science Foundation and NASA, so it's a genuine privilege and something I want to thank the people of my district in Texas and the members of this committee. It's just a privilege to be here to serve as chairman, to follow in Frank Wolf's footsteps, who has done so much for so many years to help NASA and the scientific community. Frank was a real mentor to me, and it's an extraordinary privilege for me to serve as chairman and to have you here today, General Bolden. You're a true American hero, great inspiration, I know, to a lot of young people all over the country. You're a role model for young people, I know, all over the country. We all admire you immensely. Just deeply appreciate your service to the country and the Marine Corps as an astronaut and as the leader, the administrator for NASA. We admire you immensely, sir, and it's just a real privilege for me to be here today, all of us to be here to help you achieve your mission of making sure that the United States maintains its leadership in the world as the best space program, manned and unmanned, on the planet. In the fiscal year 2016 President's request, the President's budget is asking for $18.5 billion for NASA, which is an increase of $519 million above the current fiscal year. And we have a very difficult budget environment, as you know, sir. But there's strong support of this subcommittee for your mission, and we want to make sure that you've got the resources you need and the freedom that you need and support to do what is on your plate. You've got a lot on your plate, and never seem to have enough resources. It's an ongoing problem. But in this particularly difficult budget environment, we've also got to make sure we're fully funding the FBI, the other federal law enforcement programs. We've got, of course, the Department of Commerce, the National Science Foundation, NIST, and adequately funding all of these programs and others within this budget environment is going to be very, very challenging. It's we don't yet know how the House budget is going to shape up, but we can feel pretty confident that the President's budget recommendation is one that we're simply not going to be able to achieve because it assumes a lot of tax increases, which certainly aren't going to happen. But I know from my work on this subcommittee that you're going to find all of us arm in arm in making sure that NASA gets the support that you need, sir, to do your job. We'll be using the time today to make sure, if we could, that everyone is recognized in a timely fashion, and I'd be privileged this time to recognize my good friend Chaka Fatah for any comments he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the Administrator. The Chairman is absolutely correct about the inspiration you provide. I know you made a visit to Philadelphia to Overbrook High School, which graduated one of your great astronauts, Guy in Buford, and you spoke with the students there, and you know, I'm sure even to this day it's an inspiration to all there at the in the Overbrook community. Now, I was just out at the Jet Propulsion Laboratories. My second visit, I was there a while back with you when the Mars rover landed after 8.5 months of travel. We were on the control room floor, and there was such a celebration because it showed, again, that the premier entity in the world in terms of space exploration and flight is NASA, and to land the rover there. And I got a chance to see in my last visit 2 weeks ago or so, you know, some of the work that is still being done on a daily basis at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And I know that NASA's most valuable control assets are in Texas, but you do have a little operation in Florida, and so and in California. So so at I did get a chance to visit with your national headquarters staff here also, and I've learned so much about what's going on. And there's been some miscues, I think, in some notion when we retired the shuttle fleet, that somehow America was out of the business of leading in space. The truth is that we still lead in space, and you have some active missions that are going on right now. And I would hope that as part of your testimony, you could just share a minute or two about what NASA is doing right now in space, because as we deal with the numbers, sometimes we lose a sense of what this is really all about. And our exploration of space, our development of space. And on yesterday, I got a chance to spend some time with the Commercial Spaceflight Federation for their board meeting and their dinner last night. So I know you had another celebration of very significant import into the work that you've been engaged in. So we welcome you to the committee. We want to hear about your proposed budget, and we want to work with you. And the chairman, there could not be a more committed person, I think, in the Congress to the success of NASA. We've had many conversations, and I think you have a true advocate. We're going to work together to create a bipartisan product that can help NASA continue to achieve. Thank you.
General Bolden, we welcome your testimony. Your entire statement, of course, will be entered into the record without objection, and we welcome your testimony, sir, and again, thank you for your service to the country.
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and I want to just take a quick moment to echo everyone's sentiments to Mike Ringler. I'm glad you broke the ice, because I don't want to say anything and spill the beans if nobody knew it, but it's been a great pleasure working with Mike, and we're going to miss him. So, Mike, best of luck from all of us at NASA. I want to congratulate you, Mr. Chairman, also on becoming the chairman of this committee, because I do know through years of our conversations how much it means to you and how serious you are about the duties of this committee. So I think we're very fortunate to have you in that position. I also thank you, as I mentioned earlier, for your recent visits to several of our facilities out on the West Coast, and look forward to hosting you out there some more. But Mr. Chairman, to you and the members of the subcommittee, the President is proposing, as you mentioned, fiscal year 16 budget of $18.5 billion for NASA that builds on the 2015 appropriation and the significant investments the administration and the Congress have made in America's space program over the past 6 years. Thanks to the hard work of our NASA team and partners all across America, we have made a lot of progress on our journey to Mars. In fact, we've gotten farther on this path to sending humans to Mars than at any point in NASA's history. And this budget will keep us moving forward. The support of this subcommittee and the Congress are essential to this journey. The International Space Station is the critical first step in this work. It's our springboard to the rest of the solar system, and we're committed to extending space station operations to at least 2024. Thanks to the grit, determination, and American ingenuity, we've returned ISS cargo resupply missions to the United States, insourcing these jobs and creating a new private market in low Earth orbit. Under a plan outlined by administration early in its term, we have also awarded 2 American companies, SpaceX and Boeing, fixed-price contracts to safely and cost-effectively transport our astronauts to the International Space Station from U.S. soil. This will end our sole reliance on Russia. It is critical that we receive the funding requested for 2016 so that we can meet our 2017 target date and stop writing checks to the Russian Space Agency. Our newest, most powerful rocket ever developed, the Space Launch System, or SLS, has moved from formulation to development, something no other exploration-class vehicle has achieved since the agency built the Space Shuttle. The Orion spacecraft performed flawlessly on its first flight to space this past December. The SLS and Exploration Ground Systems are on track for launch capability readiness by November of 2018, and the teams are hard at work on completing the technical and design reviews for Orion. Our budget also funds a robust science program with dozens of operating missions studying our solar system and universe. New Horizons is preparing for its arrival at Pluto in July, and Dawn is now approaching the dwarf planet Ceres. Before we send humans to Mars, robots are paving the way. We're at work on a Mars rover for 2020 and have begun planning a mission to explore Jupiter's fascinating moon, Europa. NASA is a leader in Earth science, and our constantly expanding view of our planet from space is helping us better understand and prepare for these changes. NASA has 21 research missions studying Earth, and in the last year alone, we launched an unprecedented 5 more. We also are at work on humanity's first voyage to our home star, a mission that will repeatedly pass through the sun's outer atmosphere. NASA's Hubble, Chandra, and Kepler space telescopes explore the universe beyond our solar system. Hubble's successor, the James Webb Space Telescope, or JWST, is taking shape right now out in Maryland, and a new mission is in development to extend Kepler's pioneering work in finding planets. Technology drives science, exploration, and our journey to Mars. With the President's request, NASA will continue to maintain a steady pipeline of technology to ensure that we continue to lead the world in space exploration and scientific discovery. NASA is also with you when you fly, and we're committed to transforming aviation, particularly as we just celebrated the 100th anniversary of the NACA last night at the National Air and Space Museum. But we intend to dramatically reduce the environmental impact, maintain safety in more crowded skies, and pave the way toward a revolutionary aircraft shapes and propulsion systems. Mr. Chairman, America's space program is not just alive, it's thriving. The strong support we receive from this subcommittee is making that happen, and I particularly appreciate the generous fiscal year 2015 appropriation. As the President said in his State of the Union address, and I quote, "We're pushing out into the solar system, not just to visit, but to stay, part of a re-energized space program that will send American astronauts to Mars," unquote. NASA looks forward to working with the Congress to make this vision a reality. I would be pleased to respond to your questions.
General Bolden, thank you. And before we go into some specific areas, we started our hearing schedule this year with the Inspector Generals because of they always do a good job of identifying inefficiencies and ways to save money, and particularly in light of the tough budget environment we're going to be facing this year, and how important everyone in the subcommittee, we're, as I said earlier, all of us strong supporters of NASA. I miss having my friend Adam Schiff here. He's now the member on the Intelligence Committee, and I know he will. He's here in spirit. Will be certainly working with us to help support the recommendations of this subcommittee for NASA. But if you could talk to us a minute about any specific example where NASA has implemented Inspector General or GAO recommendations to save money or create efficiencies.
I would be very glad to do so. Since the Inspector General's report, and also thanks to this committee, I think everyone knows that we contracted for a study by NAPA, which was done last year. They gave us 27 recommendations with reference to foreign national access management. We took all of those recommendations to heart and are well on the way to complying with them. We have made structural changes in our governance at the agency, and we see through our construction of facilities program that our buildings are becoming leaner, and I mean that in terms of the acronym for energy efficient. We now have LEED buildings across the nation that is showing that we are trying to save money through our facilities as we reduce our footprint, and in the place of excessive infrastructure, replace it with very efficient buildings. If you talk more about governance, the Chief Information Officer and many of the other critical people in positions at NASA headquarters now report directly to me, so they're my direct reports. So in that manner, we are streamlining the way that we conduct project management. I would point out that over the past 6 years, since I've been the NASA administrator, we are very proud to say that most programs have come in on cost and on schedule, which in the past was somewhat rare. So I think that the results that we've seen in the last 6 years say that we have taken everything to heart from the IG and from this committee.
Other than reducing the property footprint and streamlining project management, what other steps have you taken to implement, for example, cost-saving measures that were recommended either by GAO or the Inspector General?
We have done a number of efforts, and I would take it for the record to bring you a compilation of the things that we've done. But I just tried to give you a few of those
Terrific.
top-line efforts.
And also want to be sure to follow up with you on limiting the access of foreign nationals, particularly the Chinese, to NASA flight centers. There's, I think, an ongoing problem with the ability of Chinese nationals that are working at universities on research project gaining access to flight centers, and we want to make sure that that doesn't continue to happen. Program management, project management is something the Inspector General Paul Martin also talked to us about, and has pointed out that there's no problem, excuse me. He talked specifically about better program management and 4 major challenges that he identified in his report. He identified that there was an underestimation of technical complexity and how that impacted cost and risk. Funding stability is, of course, a continuing problem. Limited opportunity for program managers, development, and moving people around. Talk to us a little more, if you could, about the way that the agencies responded to his recommendations on project management.
I think what Paul was talking about was past practices where we, when we estimated cost and we estimated schedule, we were optimistic. When I talked about the fact that over the last 6 years we brought in programs and projects on time and on schedule, it speaks to that directly. We spend more time training our program and project managers with formal training. We have instituted we now have a formal position that is called the Knowledge Capture Officer at NASA headquarters, who takes lessons learned from past programs and projects, and that is taught to incoming program and project managers so that they understand the mistakes and the errors of program and project management in the past. We now have a process that all of our programs go through, which formalizes our estimation of cost and schedule, and we have set a threshold of 70% certainty for cost and schedule as a threshold for us. And since we've done that, I think if you look at our science programs, that is what enabled us to bring things like MAVEN or some of the others in, if not under cost, actually on cost. I think that's what Paul was addressing.
He also suggested giving your information technology administrator full responsibility, and I hope that you're following through on that recommendation.
Yes, sir. The comment that I made earlier about making the Chief Information Officer for the agency a direct report to me, I think that's what Paul was talking about. So the CIO, the Chief Technology Officer, is that what you're talking about?
But on cyber, because there's a lot of concern about the vulnerability of NASA applications. You obviously have a very big public footprint, as you should, but the availability and all of those applications, all those apps that are out there for people's phones, and all the public websites open you up to hacking. And he was concerned that your information technology director doesn't have the authority that he needs as in other agencies. I think that's what I'm talking about.
And that was the reference that I made to, and you use the term information technology.
I may not be
That
using
is
the
my
right-
chief information officer.
Okay.
And so the chief information officer is a direct report to me, to the administrator,
But in
which
terms
means,
of scope of his authority, I hope you're taking his recommendation to heart to give that individual more authority.
yes, sir. The fact that he reports to me means that he makes policy for the agency, since I make policy for the agency. So he has direct responsibility and control over IT infrastructure across the enterprise. So all of the chief information officers at the individual centers subsequently report to him.
Okay.
The only area that we have not done what the AIG recommended was incorporating program IT systems under the chief information officer, and we're looking at that, but in my opinion, right now, given what we have and given the funds we have, that might be a bridge too far, because what we're talking about would be he would have responsibility for maintaining the information technology programs on the International Space Station or on Mars Curiosity or Maven, and that's something that I'm not sure that any agency of the government has done that yet. We're looking at it. I'm not saying we won't do it, but we are not there yet. So we've got a long way to go before we incorporate all of the
Okay.
program and project IT infrastructure and assets under the chief information officer.
I'll follow
but
up
for
with you.
everything else, he has the hammer. So.
I'll follow up with you individually
Okay.
on that. Let me ask about one other, getting into a specific area, and then I want to recognize my good friend, Mr. Fatah, about plutonium production, because I want to make sure that you've got the plutonium necessary for future missions. The budget request is for $99 million for NASA to pay the Department of Energy to produce a supply of plutonium. I understand that we're approaching the end of the lifespan for the machines that actually make the plutonium cakes, or whatever they're called, that actually make the pellets, I assume. Talk to us about that and the availability of plutonium for future missions, in particular the Europa mission and Outer Planets missions that are going to require.
Mr. Chairman, I will say, you make an assumption that I want to not let you make, and that is that Europa will be a nuclear-powered mission. We're looking at
Still in the design phase.
Yes, sir. I just want to make sure that no one in my organization had led you to believe that
No,
we had made a
still in the
decision
design
yet
phase. But it's
on
good to have
the
that
power
option.
system for Europa.
You're going to need that option for deep
Yes, sir.
space, outer planets.
But in answer to your question, for all NASA Outer Planets missions, for Mars 2020 and others that we currently have in our inventory, in planning, we will have sufficient plutonium-238 to carry out those missions. We continue to work with the Department of Energy. As you mentioned, as you alluded, a problem there on the DOE side is just the facilities and the condition of the facilities. And we continue to work at an intermediate management level with the Department of Energy to make sure that the funds that we provide to them will, in fact, partially be used to make sure that the facilities are there so that they can make the plutonium that we need. They are the producer of plutonium-238. Right now, to my knowledge, NASA is the only user of plutonium-238. So it's very important to us that they get it right.
If you could, would your folks get us a recommendation on what's necessary to make sure that machinery is
We will do that, Mr. Chairman.
brought up to speed, so you've got it for
Yes,
what
sir.
I think will ultimately need a robust Outer Planets program?
Yes, sir. Will
Let
do.
me recognize my good friend, Mr. Fatah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is follow-up on what the chairman's talking about in terms of plutonium. And this is at Oak Ridge National Lab, right? Plutonium, the
I will-
238 production, right?
I will take it for the record
Right,
to find
yeah.
out exactly where it's
So
done.
I think
I
that
should
'cause-
know, but I don't.
I've done some work in this space, and I think that you're correct that NASA is the only consumer, but it is a commitment on DOE's part to make sure that you have what you need. But let me go to the big aspiration here, which is flight into deep space, out of lower Earth orbit for humans. And you talked about the great work that's being done now on the launch system and where you are there's some sense, and it's only because of your success, that perhaps we can move the timetable and maybe that's not the case, but, and these are probably people who are not as intimately familiar with the work that you're doing, but if you could comment for a minute on how you see the timeline, that would be good.
Congressman, I will do my best. The president has set a rough outline for us in demanding that we provide a way to put humans with an asteroid in by 2025, but most importantly, that we be on Mars or in the Martian system in the 2030s. And that is with that direction in mind and the agreement by the Congress, bipartisan agreement by the Congress, we have a program, a long-range program in existence today to which we're marching, and that calls for several things. America is still the leader in space, and I'm glad to hear members of the committee acknowledge that, because it's important for all of us to understand that. There is no close competitor, to be quite honest. But in order for us to stay the leader in space, there are a number of things we have to do, and deep space exploration is one of them, but we have to make sure that we have a very robust low Earth orbit infrastructure that will be run by American industry eventually, or non-government entities. And so critical to that is the completion of the commercial crew program that we now have scheduled to actually fly in 2017. We have brought about commercial cargo, and that has proven to be successful. And I think by the end of this year, you will see how resilient it is when Orbital Sciences flies a Cygnus on a vehicle other than their own vehicle. So when you're buying a service and the service provider provides it, even when a part of their system goes away, that talks about resilience.
Well, I was on the floor of SpaceX out in California looking as they put the Falcon 9 together. And it is amazing that this industry that NASA has spawned is so robust now. And you have Boeing, you have SpaceX, low Earth orbit, the commercial crew. What's in the president's budget is 1.2, I think, 4, right?
Yes, sir.
$1.24 billion.
You go one digit farther than I can go.
And is that sufficient to continue to, and then you have some other pieces of that. You have the Advanced Exploration System at about 238, and then you have the Opportunity Flight Program, which is another opportunity to seed this industry at, I think, 15 plus. So can you talk about whether that's sufficient to do this, the work that needs to be done in lower Earth orbit, so that you can focus on, and the committee really likes to talk about going to Mars. Asteroids, you know, not really, I think, that the thing that grabs our attention in total.
That's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay.
Mr.
That's all right.
Go ahead, Mr. Administrator, yeah.
Congressman Fatah, I appreciate your reference to the total picture, because that's what's really important. And I talked about commercial crew and cargo. $1.2 billion that we requested in the 2016 budget for commercial crew is essential if we are to bring in the two providers with their capability to carry crew to orbit by 2017. The third leg, the second leg of the stool is actually the International Space Station. And that is an area that I need to ensure that we don't shortchange, that we don't look at it as a bank and begin to pull money out of the International Space Station and International Space Station operations, because when we use it as a bank, usually the first place we go is cargo flights, fewer cargo flights, which could eventually put the crew in jeopardy because we're not able to get stuff there. The third leg that you refer to is SLS and Orion, and that is what, once we have a robust low Earth orbit environment, then we use SLS and Orion to take us, first of all, back to cislunar space. That's around the moon over the 10-year period of the 20s. So beginning in the earliest part that we can of the 20s, we'll put Orion on SLS and send it to cislunar space for multiple flights, and then on to Mars. So it's the three-legged stool that's absolutely critical that you talk about.
Red light's on, but if the chairman would yield for just I think you got the Russians' attention in some other respects. They took a decision this week to announce that they were joining a decision that you had already made a year or so ago about extending the life and their presence in cooperation relative to the International Space Station. Could you just share with the committee where we are with all of our international partners now that Russia has made this decision?
And I would just caution, what you hear coming out of Russia is not always what they intended to say. I am encouraged that they now have, in fact, in their reorganization, because they're going through reorganization just as we are, they now have what's called the Roscosmos Science and Technology Council. So that's a brand new entity that was put in place when they put Roscosmos under the umbrella of their whole space industry organization, and it's much more complicated than I want to try to explain to people. We were encouraged when Yuri Kopchev, who I consider to be, because he is a former colleague of mine, who I
You
consider...
did mission with him, right?
No, this is not the astronaut. This was the former head of the Russian Space Agency, of Roscosmos, and it was Mr. Kopchev who actually could be considered the Russian father of the International Space Station, because he and a predecessor of mine, Dan Golden, were the two people who were most responsible for getting the station started, if you will. But he is the head of the Science and Technology Council, and it was that council that met and said that it was their position that Russia should remain committed to the International Space Station, and that they should remain committed through 2024 before they go off and start talking about taking pieces off and establishing their own low Earth orbit infrastructure. So I think that's what you refer to. I would say one more thing, because you commented about international partners. Everyone should take note of the 3 spacewalks that were completed this past week. Butch Wilmore and Terry Virts did 3 absolutely amazing spacewalks, which in themselves were great.
But 5 hours?
They were long. Each of them was in the neighborhood of 6 to 8 hours. But what was most important was that completed the installation of the International Docking Adapter, which is it gives the International Space Station now the capability of accepting any vehicle from any partner that wants to bring crew to the International Space Station. So we're now ready to receive. There may be a few puts and takes we've got to do, but the station is now ready to receive Boeing, SpaceX, any American company that wants to fly a vehicle to the International Space Station. And the international part I wanted to point out for everybody, the IV crew member, and I've been one, that's the hardest thing on the whole thing. The IV crew member, the person inside choreographing all 3 spacewalks, was Samantha Cristoforetti, who is an Italian astronaut. So if you don't think that our partners are doing their part and that they're excited about this, that was a true international effort to set up American industry to be able to service the International Space Station with crews, and that was incredible. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for yielding for those additional few seconds.
We recognize Mr. Jenkins at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Administrator. I'm from down the home of the Rocket Boys in Homer Hickam, West Virginia. So I would like to spend just my brief minute or two relating, bring us back to earth a little bit about some of your work and what NASA does, and obviously is participating in grant funding and projects in my state of West Virginia. The chairman brought up the IG's work. I'd like to maybe get your take a little bit on the NASA IV&V program up in Fairmont, West Virginia. Critically important to our state. Your feelings about that program and its value.
IV&V has been of critical value to us since its beginnings. It is an asset that we use to do safety assurance evaluations and the like, and a number of other things that go on there. I think the IG, if I remember his comments, some people took it to mean that he was recommending that we get out of IV&V or out of the facility. And that's not something that is immediately on our plate. We're looking at, as we look at our assets and our capabilities, we're looking at what we should do with each. But IV&V is a critical facility.
Would you mind sharing, to the extent you're able to, or maybe a follow-up, some of the details behind the importance and, as you say, the value propositions that come out of that facility and what we do.
IV&V, or independent verification and validation, is a process that NASA uses. I think most industries use it, but NASA uses the process to look at dominantly software to make sure that we can put faults and failures and all kinds of stuff into the program and make sure that it responds appropriately, that it doesn't trip the software such that it just loses its mind, if you will. And so IV&V does not do the critical software evaluations for the International Space Station, but it does critical software evaluations for some of our other activities. So that's the kind of work you do. And you can't just say, we're gonna close down the one in West Virginia and go do it somewhere else, because it takes time. You've got the talent, the brain power, and you've got the facilities that are there.
And when you make mention that some may have interpreted the IG as suggesting, that leads me to believe that maybe, have you had a follow-up discussion with the IG, and maybe the way it was written or interpreted, that maybe that's a conclusion that should not have been suggested?
I don't change the IG's mind. What I do is I respond to the IG's report. And what we do is we cooperate with them as they formulate the report, and we give them as much as we can in hopes that the report will not reflect something that we think is inaccurate. But we do respond. If they give us recommendations or findings or the like, then we respond back to them. And so I don't remember exactly what our responses were, but I think we told the IG that we appreciated very much the recommendation. However, these are the actions that we're taking right now. So the IG's report, the chairman mentioned the IG. The IG's report to me is that's not a directive. That is a report of a finding by an inspector general. He doesn't direct, or the office of the inspector general doesn't direct the agency to do anything. If I want to, as the CEO of the agency, if I want to assume the risk, then I just tell the IG, I really appreciate this point. I think you may be correct, but I am willing to assume that risk at this time.
The second and final area of interest to me is, again, your financial support. I just spoke last night to the EPSCoR program and had the honor of introducing NASA's former chief scientist that's now head of National Science Foundation. Your support for undergraduate research, STEM programs. Today happens to be Undergraduate Research Day in West Virginia, that a lot of bright-minded students make presentations. NASA's investment in education through the consortium, the Space Grant Consortium and all. Can you share with me and the committee some of the values of that effort as part of your budget?
I don't think we can put enough money into the work that NASA does towards STEM education. And I say that not lightly, to be quite honest. I think you can always use more. However, I do say all the time that NASA spends if we get the requested president's budget, we will devote $18 billion to STEM education in this country, because there is nothing that we do in the agency, there's no office, no department, no anything that does not have some impact on STEM education, whether it's just employees acting as mentors or providing NASA content to a school or something of that nature that doesn't get counted in an education budget, but we have $16.8 billion that we apply towards STEM education. It's incredibly valuable.
Major General, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And after we go through the members, I want to be sure to recognize our colleague, Mr. Schiff, for a statement after the members that were here first are recognized. So I'll go at this time to Mr. Serrano.
Thank you so much. I admire, respect, and love my ranking member, but he almost gave me a heart attack when he said asteroids were not important. Important, since one of my questions is going to be about how does he Puerto Rican Observatory. And let me first tell you, sir, that one of the best experiences I've had as a member of this committee has been not only to have been twice a ranking member under Hal Rogers and Frank Wolf, but also the work we've done in our districts. And I wanted to speak to you about that. The last time we had an event, it was a wonderful event. We had flown the Puerto Rican flag in one of the flights, then we had flown the Dominican flag in one of the flights, and astronauts came down to Hostos Community College and presented both flags, and the room was full of kids and community people, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful event. And then there have been many times when astronauts have come into the classroom to speak, and it's one of those few times where you don't have to worry about the children paying attention, because, oh, he went up in space, and that captures. So where is that program at, those visits to school? Do you continue them? Has the budget hurt you, in doing that kind of work? Because I think it's great, and I support it totally.
Congressman, I think during the period when we were, the period of more active pursuit of sequester, I think everyone knows, it's common knowledge that travel in federal agencies was significantly curtailed. So during that period of time, we did have to cut back on school visits and the like from astronauts and NASA employees. However, over the last year or so, we've relatively restored our school visits and our other kinds of outreach activities to some normalcy. I was privileged to visit Puerto Rico earlier this year, and actually had a chance to, you mentioned Arecibo, but had an opportunity to go out to the observatory there and walk on the telescope, on the dish and everything else, and talk to students in Puerto Rico. There is nothing that promotes interest in STEM education, as you said, like a hands-on experience for students.
Absolutely.
Mr. Jenkins, well, somebody mentioned, although he's not Huntsville, but down in Huntsville, we do it used to be called the Moon Buggy Challenge, and it's now, I think, called the Exploration Buggy Race. But we have students from all over the world who come to compete in that and build buggies from bicycle parts and other kinds of things. So we still continue our outreach programs.
And I encourage you to do so, and I will be a member of this committee that will push for that, because I think those are wonderful programs and a wonderful way for NASA. NASA is one of those agencies that doesn't hurt anybody. On the contrary, it just brings joy and solidifies our future. Let me move on to the observatory. I know you are. The observatory is funded mostly by NSF, as you know, and NASA plays a major role. And a couple of years ago, they were actually talking not only of backing off from helping the observatory, but even getting rid of it. And not this committee, I wish I could say this committee, but it was scientists who wrote, especially in a report that said that Arecibo played a major role in keeping an eye on things that have to be kept an eye on. So, of course, I'm in support of keeping it open. I know the chairman is also, and so is Mr. Honda and the ranking member, other people. What is the status right now, at least from NASA's point of view? And to your knowledge, although that's a question for them, is NSF still thinking about, although they've backed away from that, doing something?
I cannot answer what Dr. Cordova and NSF, what their position is right now, but I can say that NASA has, we currently, I think we provide in the neighborhood of $3 million each year for support at Arecibo, but I'll take it for the record and get that specific amount to you.
Right.
So we continue to push for the telescope and its availability. In fact, one of the reasons that I went to Puerto Rico was because I'd heard about it, but I'd never seen it. I wanted to go, meet the people there, and they're incredibly enthusiastic about what they do. So I think it is valuable. The unfortunate thing is it is not a NASA asset. It is a National Science Foundation asset. It's like McMurdo Bay in Antarctica. It's like many of the research facilities around the world, the way that responsibility is divided up. NASA frequently is the dominant player at our international research facilities, but they don't belong to us. They belong to other agencies of the government, and we don't have a say in whether or not they close them or open them.
Right.
But we generally.
Well, my time is up, but I hope that we can work together for the part that NASA plays in keeping Arecibo open, and it is a good thing to see that the chairman has always been a supporter, the man that's always been a supporter of IDC was now chairman of the committee, and the ranking member has always been supportive. So we'll continue to work on it.
And, sir, I will try to get, for the record, we'll contact the NSF and see if they can provide us a comment, since I don't.
We'll turn it over to you, and then we'll take
No,
care of you.
no, I'm not asking for more on my plate. I don't need more.
What is the $3 million a year for?
Let me find out specifically what it's for, but I think most of it is for programs and instruments and
Instrument time.
Instrument time or instrument modernization, because although the facility belongs to NSF, we frequently will have
Your customer.
investigators who go in and actually build instruments that are used at the observatory.
I know they need an upgrade on a lot of their equipment and some maintenance. I know that one of the cables had a problem, but nevertheless, we're.
It was
It
running
was the
when I was
cable
there, but
Ja-
it's
I
not
think
in
it was
great
the
shape.
cable James Bond hung from when they made the movie there.
Mr. Chairman, I think that the member can be assured that we're interested. This is part of a series of observatories around the world that are critically important to NASA's success, and
Absolutely,
also to deal with asteroids that might be coming our way. So,
absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
We're
you,
there,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Serrano. You
Thank
bet. Mr. Kilmer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll just echo Mr. Serrano's enthusiasm for the NASA Explorer schools. We've got one in my district, and it was certainly one of the highlights. I had a question regarding small satellites. That's one of the fastest growing segments of the space industry, high relevance for science and national security and commercial industry, and NASA has really helped advance development and demonstration of technologies in all sorts of arenas, whether it be communications, navigation, propulsion, power, science instrument capabilities. So how do we expand and accelerate those types of cost-effective investments, and how do we ensure that NASA's programs taking full advantage of investments that are also being made by industry and by the Defense Department?
We collaborate with the Defense Department, the NRO, industry, academia, and everybody in trying to promote the use of small satellites and a specific type of small satellite called CubeSat. We work with our international partners. There is now a private entity, I just drew a blank on what the name of the company is, that provides the program that gets CubeSats to the International Space Station for distribution or for deployment from the Japanese experiment module. We have the CubeSat deployment mechanism on the Japanese experiment module, and it's the only one that has an airlock, so they can actually bring the deployer inside, load it up with CubeSats, put it back out, and then deploy them. So it is a program that we really push. The Ames Research Center out in Mountain View, California, tends to be the center of effort for CubeSat development and small sats for a number of reasons. They're in the heart of Silicon Valley, and so they have a way of getting not just American students, but students all over the world interested in this. I just came back from a trip to South America, and in the 4 countries I visited, one of the things that we could talk about with them in trying to expand the number of international, what we call non-traditional partners, was the use of CubeSats, teaching students to use CubeSat to do very basic things. And so it allows them to become partners.
Thank you. You mentioned the space station. I wanted to ask about that program. To some degree, it could be viewed as too big to fail. What recourse does NASA have if commercial crew contractors are unable to meet the 2017 milestone of sending astronauts to the space station from American soil, or if program funds are exhausted?
Nothing's too big to fail, in my estimation. However, there are some things that are critical for the success of keeping America #1 in space. The International Space Station is one of those. It is a very unique facility. It is a one-of-a-kind facility. It is a mini United Nations, and it is a place where we do technology development and human research. It is critical. I don't even want to think about what happens if the Russians decide that they want to change the way they operate with us. That's what makes it so critical that we've received full funding for commercial crew, so that we can guarantee that it is not NASA, not the U.S. government, not money that kept American industry from delivering. I have faith in American industry. I always have. And I talked about when we put a plan together, work it with them, and say we can do something, we do it on time and on cost. And I have no reason to believe that SpaceX and Boeing will not be able to bring in their programs in 2017 as they have planned. They've given us milestones. They get paid for milestones. Those are firm fixed-price contracts, so we know that it won't overrun because any additional money over and above what they think it's going to cost, the company has to fund. So you would have to find Boeing or SpaceX deciding that it is no longer fiscally viable for the company, the corporation, for them not to deliver.
Thanks. I see I'm near time up, so I'll submit some other questions for the record, and thank you,
The
Mr. Chair.
gentleman with you for a
Thank
minute.
you.
Now, but for instance, because I don't want there to be unnecessary concern, SpaceX has met the first milestone, right, on the...
Oh, SpaceX has
right.
met several milestones on the commercial crew milestone list. But
Okay, and Boeing?
And Boeing, they both
Right.
have.
So, you know, I mean, there is not, that I'm aware of any concern that we won't be able to meet this timeline, as long as we can meet the budget number.
That's the key,
Right.
right?
And that was the point I tried to make, Congressman Fattah, was industry is going to perform as long as the government doesn't renege on its promise to pay. And we promised that we would pay them $6.2 billion combined. And unless we renege on that, then I think Boeing and SpaceX will deliver.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gilman, Mr. Hondo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, welcome, Mr. Administrator. It's great to see you here, and it's great to have an administrator that's got ground and knows what the hell you're talking about. Because, you know, sometimes we have leaders that are more of a bookkeeper than of looking at funding programs based upon its mission, and we've gone through that period now. It's good to have you in it. I understand that we already had a comment about the 100th year celebration, so I won't say anything about that, but I know that NASA Ames Center Director Pete Warren is retiring, and it's going to be a great loss to us, but it's going to be good for the private industry. And I guess that's going to be tough to find someone that's going to replace him and fill his shoes, but I think that we're here to support that kind of a direction, that we find someone that will enhance A in NASA and keep the A in NASA going. One of the questions I had was that the administration's handling of the Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, better known as SOFIA mission, in the President's 2016 budget notes that NASA plans to hold a senior review for SOFIA in the spring of 16. And as you know, SOFIA just became fully operational in February of 2014 and was in Germany for a good portion of last year, undergoing a heavy maintenance visit. Now, this senior review is usually after 4 years of operation. And I guess my question is, like, why is it so early? And because it gives a sense that NASA and OMB are setting up SOFIA to fail when it only had approximately 1 year out of the 4 years fully to, you know, open its wings and you know, have its contribution better known. Can you address yourself to that?
Congressman, when I approached the folk in our Science Mission Directorate, I learned one of the instruments or one of our assets with which I'm very familiar, the Hubble Space Telescope, actually underwent senior review much earlier than it was scheduled to, because we wanted to make sure that we had good definition on the out-year programs for it, because that's basically what we're trying to do with SOFIA. We're trying to take a look at its performance to date. Had we flown SOFIA when we were originally scheduled to fly it, we would have been well beyond a normal senior review at this time. But because of issues with the development of SOFIA and getting it to operational condition, then we're somewhat behind in where we would have been. But the senior review is to make a determination of what its future mission should be, how we balance the schedule for its flights? To evaluate whether or not the science community thinks that we can fly fewer flights and get the same amount of data that we wanted before. So it is not a review that I look at as a reason or something trying to justify shutting down Sophia. Sophia is funded in our 15 bill thanks to this committee, and we requested funding for it in the 16 request.
So the life and its expectations to continue, it's just you're doing this review with the understanding that there may be a lot of stuff that has already could be done, that usually you would have waited a few more years, but that you have some confidence in this performance.
I have confidence in Sophia's performance to date, and I have confidence in what I don't know, because it's out of my area of expertise, is what does the science community feel the relative value of Sophia is for other assets that gather the same type of data. Sophia is somewhat unique, to be quite honest, because it's an in the atmosphere observatory that I understand looks in different wavelengths than many other of the assets that we have, whether in space or on the ground. But the science community is always looking at how do they get the most efficient results from the experiments they have. This goes back to how long do you fly anything?
Okay.
But I'm not concerned about Sophia's performance.
Okay, I appreciate that. And one of the concerns I have about NASA is that over the years we've lost staffing, civil servants, if you will. And it doesn't feel like we're setting up the system where we want to attract and retain our employees at NASA. And so I guess the question is, well, what are you doing to protect the NASA workforce and ensure that the NASA centers have the ability to hire and retain the best and the brightest scientists? Because that's our human treasure that we have, that we built up over the years. And if we're looking at continuing programs like STEM and everything else like that, these are the folks that have the deepest experience to be able to talk to youngsters.
Congressman, at the risk of offending the committee, I'm going to take a chance.
Go ahead.
The reductions in force that you see are not things that we do voluntarily. This Congress believes that that all of the nation's problems rest with civil servants. That's the workforce you're talking about. We're not talking about contractors. Civil servants are when the Congress says that the problem is government employees. That's the people sitting behind me. That's what you're talking about. And that's the people at Ames and at Armstrong and all over this country. You don't get something for nothing. If you want us to cut the size of government, you're talking about cutting people.
Okay.
And, I understand what you're saying, but that is a contributor to the problem that we are. When we looked at sequestration, you're talking about people.
I agree with you, and I think that this is a message that needs to resonate among members of Congress and those who are in positions to make sure that we do not go in that direction, and that we understand clearly that you get what you pay for. And based upon the comments I heard this morning about the value of centers and how it's run and who runs it, that we should take that position when we look at budget and planning in the future, and making sure that we do not vilify civil servants, but we embrace them and make sure that we understand their full value. And that cuts across the entire gamut, and I'm sure that my colleagues on the subcommittee agrees with that. And the point is that we have to put up the fight to protect the assets that we have right now, especially the human assets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Honda. We've been joined by Chairman Ederholt, another strong advocate and supporter of NASA and our MAN program, as I am, and it's my pleasure to introduce this time gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Ederholt.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. Good to have you here. And
Good to be here. Thank you.
first of all, let me apologize for my voice. I'm overcoming a sore throat, and I was in a hearing with Chairman Rogers this morning. He was at I've been chairing the Ag Subcommittee Appropriations, and we had the FDA commissioner in this morning, and he said it reminded him of what Mark Twain said about Wagner's music. Said it's not as bad as it sounds. So that's sort of why I'm not as bad as it sounds. But anyway, I just have a couple of questions. But thank you for being here, and I appreciate Chairman Culberson for letting me slip in here and ask a few questions. I want to ask one question about SLS program, and then a second very short question, and then the time remaining we'll submit for the record. But glad to hear the integration plan for SLS, Orion, and ground operations are underway at headquarters. Slipping beyond the 2018 for the EM1 flight is a little more disconcerting. As you know, EM1 flight will use an upper stage known as ICPS. I don't know if a definite budget plan in NASA's out years for the flights beyond EM1, but it seems to me that there must be a firm decision soon on whether to human rate the ICPS. And I'm wondering if not human rating the ICPS and instead human rating the new upper stage for use on the EM2 mission could save taxpayer dollars. Progress soon on the upper stage might allow for options as we plan large science missions such as Europa Clipper. We could also use the power that the upper stage to cut the flight time by half or more and get the data back to our scientists faster. Just wanted to turn it over to you and what your thoughts are on this approach.
Sir, as I was commenting earlier before you came in, our approach to keep us as the leaders in space is to try to put together a program in its totality. And when you talk about human exploration, or when you talk about exploration solar system, and let's just not even, human and robotic exploration, our program calls for being able to get humans, first of all, into cislunar space. But that's not the only thing we want to do. We want to be able to go to Mars. And so the reason that it has taken us to this point to be able to give you all the answers that you want on SLS and Orion is because we're looking at how to get the totality of the place. How do we get multiple flights out of SLS and Orion? If I focus on the very first flight, which happens to be unmanned, and that's where my focus is, then I could easily lose sight of what I need for the downstream flight. So we find that it is more economical and it is much more efficient if we plan for a block of flights, the program, such that if you gave me more money, as you're probably going to ask, what would I do? I would buy down risk. And what do I mean when I say buy down risk for SLS and Orion? I would go and have Bill Gerstenmaier, I would approve his purchase of pieces and parts for EM3, 4, 5, farther down the line, so that when you go to SpaceX and you look on their floor, there are engines all over the place. There are engines for flights they don't have yet, and that's the way they buy down risk. That's the way industry does it. You put assets in place so that you can carry out a program years in advance, and so that's what I would do. I would not focus on trying to get EM1 earlier, EM2 earlier. We have a program in place that calls for them to fly at a particular date, and we're not going to change that appreciably with more money. So I think an exploration upper stage is what you're talking about, the EUS. The interim upper stage is something because we don't have the one that we really want to fly for all of our exploration missions. It's an interim upper stage that will allow us to fly, the first mission, but that's not what we would ideally like to live with. But that again we'll come back to the Congress and tell you what we need in a budget that'll sustain us through multiple administrations and multiple Congresses, as opposed to one flight.
I see my time slipping away, but let me ask this one last question before I have to go back to a subcommittee that I've been chairing. The Marshall Space Flight Center, which you know is on the edge of my district, has a tremendous rock propulsion skill base there. It's a rich history in propulsion projects going back to the days of von Braun. The National Institute for Rocket Propulsion Systems, or the NIRPS, as the acronym goes, is located at Marshall. And I hear it's doing great things for the nation. And would you agree that it's doing good things?
We affectionately call it NERPS, and NERPS is doing great things. In fact, if you all will allow me to use the acronym just because it's easier, but the important thing about NERPS was, and it was the brainchild of some of the engine folk at Marshall, because they saw how NASA was working on engine technology, DOD was working on engine technology, industry was working on engine technology. So what the Institute attempts to do is to bring all the disparate bodies together to talk about national needs. And so that's what's done there. And we have buy-in from the Air Force, we have buy-in from industry, so everyone is represented when you go. If you were to go to Marshall and ask somebody, when was the last time the Air Force was in here, or when was the last time industry was in here, they'd probably tell you, well, we had a meeting yesterday and everybody was here. So that was its intent, and I think it's vital for the future of propulsion for this nation.
Okay, good to hear. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Administrator, for being here, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman Adderhold. We recognize the young lady from Alabama, Ms. Roby.
Well, you get two in a row, so I want to continue with what my colleague from Alabama was talking about as it relates to Marshall Space Flight Center's activities. And across Alabama, the impact is, nearly 20,000 jobs. Their total economic impact in the state of Alabama is $3.3 billion. In terms of procurement, almost 60% of Marshall dollars are spent in Alabama. The Space Launch System, or SLS, results in almost half the jobs related to Marshall. And in addition to that, the International Space Station is managed by folks at Marshall through the Payload Operations Center. Personnel manage experiments on the station around the clock, and they integrate the various components and manage the logistics involved in getting these payloads to the station. They develop systems at Marshall used for experiments and life support, and the oxygen and water recycling unit is just one example of the ingenuity from the people at Marshall. So back to SLS, and thank you for being here today. I know NASA intends to launch the first full-scale test flight by late 2017. And I wanted you to take some time to comment about the needed steps and proper funding in this year's budget request and future requests that are needed to keep that launch date on time.
Congressman.
Great question.
Okay, and I thought I answered it, but I'll try it again, before you came in, not
Okay,
since you
sorry,
did.
there's
No,
like
no,
four
no,
hearings going on at the
no,
same
because
time.
I obviously did not answer it as well as I thought I did. I just finished in response to your question, the one thing that all of us agree is that we have to maintain America's leadership in space. And what I attempted to do, or what my team attempted to do when we gave this budget recommendation to the President and he sent it over here, was there are three things that we want to do. We want to continue to fund our capability to launch American astronauts from American soil. So that's commercial crew, commercial cargo for cargo and the like. We want to be able to get the three legs of the stool in place for deep space exploration. That's commercial crew and cargo, a low Earth orbit infrastructure, the International Space Station, and SLS on Orion. And the final thing we want to do is we want to make sure that we maintain our preeminence in science, technology, and engineering. And in order to do all those, my job is to try to parse the funds up that we request to you such that it supports a well-planned program to get us to point A, if you will, which is what you're talking about. First flight for us has already occurred. That was Orion on the 5th of October. So that was the first flight in our exploration program. Very successful. It was not in its figuration for, sending humans to deep space, but that was the first flight, very successful. Second flight for us will come sometime after 2018, to be precise. And the reason that I say sometime after 2018, and we will tell this Congress much more precisely sometime this summer when we finish with the next milestone on Orion itself. And you may say, I asked you about SLS, why are you telling me about Orion? Because they're a pair. We're not talking about flying SLS without Orion for deep space exploration just yet. So when we know when Orion will be ready to fly, then we will know when we can fly an SLS Orion pair. SLS ground systems are ready now for we have a launch readiness date of late 2018. So that's in place. We don't have a launch readiness date yet for Orion, so we'll give you that.
What would be the most negative or detrimental thing that could contribute to not allowing you to reach these goals?
Not to fund commercial crew and find that we've got to go back to the Russians and pay more money for Soyuz seats over and over and over again, because it would mean that the U.S. has given up on having its own capability to get its crews to low Earth orbit. And if we don't have the low Earth orbit infrastructure that I talked about very earlier on in my testimony, there is no exploration program. It is a program, it is an integrated program, and it's really important for this committee to understand that. We found, Mr. Chairman, that there was a piece of the program we never even considered before we started looking at Europa, and how do we speed that mission up? So potentially, and I have to be very careful, because the chairman wants me to say we're going to fly an SLS. We're not ready there yet. But if we don't have SLS and Orion supported by commercial crew and cargo and a viable low Earth orbit infrastructure, there is no SLS Europa mission. I would not bring this committee a proposal that I build an SLS so that we can go to Europa. But I would bring this committee a proposal that says we have a program for a journey to Mars, and here's the way that integrated program works. Here are the three legs that I've got to have in place: commercial crew and cargo. I've got to have the International Space Station for some period of time now to buy down the risk there. And then I've got to have SLS and Orion, and they're all necessary, but I don't need to spend all the money on all of them right now to get that.
Thank you very much. I yield back.
We recognize the new ranking member of the Intelligence Committee and a valued member of this subcommittee who's reserved his seniority, my good friend Mr. Schiff from California, for any statement he'd like to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for recognizing me and allowing me to attend this important hearing. I look forward to working with you as well as the administrator to ensure NASA receives the necessary funding to fulfill its core missions. I may be on leave technically, but my heart is still very much with NASA and my commitment as well. In particular, I'm hopeful that Congress can work with NASA to provide the funding for NASA's Planetary Science Division so that we can continue to learn more about our solar system from Mars 2020 to a mission to Jupiter's exciting moon, Europa. These missions must be fully funded and made a priority for both NASA and the Congress. I share the conviction that our chairman has that we need to make every effort to fund the priorities of the decadal survey. These are the nation's topmost scientific priorities, and the potential for really revelatory discoveries is just so exciting. And so I stand shoulder to shoulder with our chairman. And I wonder, Mr. Chairman, if I could submit questions for the record, if I'm permitted to do so. But I thank the gentleman for allowing me to attend and for all of his great advocacy for planetary science and for all of NASA, and I'm happy to yield back.
We're going to continue to rely on your advice and guidance in this, Adam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Privilege to work with you and the California delegation, my good friend Mr. Tom. This whole committee is devoted to that NASA has the resources and the support that you need, sir, to do your mission. And I think, as Mr. Honda said, or Mr. Serrano, that everything NASA does is just pure good. That's actually a nice way to look at it. And I'd frankly love to see, if you could, Seth, or somebody in your shop, find that survey that Sean O'Keefe did. Remember, he retained a firm in Baltimore to do a name brand recognition goodwill survey of NASA, and discovered that after the United States Marine Corps, General Bolden, that NASA had the highest positive name ID of any entity of the federal government. Am I remember that correctly? It's extraordinary, and we're here to help you and support you. And would like to follow up on Ms. Roby's question and one that Mr. Adderholt asked, because but first, let me ask you a really important question that I've been meaning to ask. It deals with the manned space program. What is NASA's contingency plans in the event the Russians just say no more flights? Because obviously Vladimir Putin is reminiscent of Joe Stalin. He's very aggressive. We're going to continue to see, I think, the Russians attempt to expand their sphere of influence very aggressively, and I don't see relations improving anytime soon. If the Russians decide to just cancel our ability to use Russian vehicles to get to the International Space Station, what is your contingency plan?
Mr. Chairman, it is important for me to state very clearly that while we are always looking at things that could go wrong, when you look at the realities on the ground, the relationship between NASA and Roscosmos remains very strong. And indications are that while our two governments and our political and diplomatic relations are not very good, indications when you look at fiscal dealings, availability of rocket engines, support for the International Space Station, continued support for launching crews, and commitment to the International Space Station through 2024. And that comes from, in Russia, that comes from the top. You know, it's so the indications are that the rhetoric on the political side is not the same when you talk about space exploration. However, we are always making plans for contingencies should something go wrong.
That's my question.
There are always Mrs. Roby mentioned what on a bad day, you know, on your worst day, what happens? On the worst day, the Russians decide that they're no longer interested in space exploration, and that
or carrying us to the space station.
Mr. Chairman, I know this is going to sound like I have some crystal ball or something. We are an incredibly valuable partner for them. We are an indispensable partner for them in space exploration. If they made a decision that they no longer wanted to carry us to the International Space Station, they have subsequently made a decision that they no longer want to operate the International Space Station. That's just simple. And it's because we are responsible for the day-to-day operations control of the International Space Station. They provide propulsion, but even we are planning right now for them to, at some point take away the propulsion module that's there right now, and we have other means to do that.
But of course, one of NASA's great strength has always been that you plan for the unexpected. You've always got redundant systems on your spacecraft, on the ground. You've got the ability to fall back on another system if one fails. Yeah. And we need to know, Congress needs to know, what is your plan in the event the Russians say, we're not flying Americans to the space station anymore? Please answer that directly. You got to be planning. I know that Mike Griffin, for example, didn't want to fly to the mission to the Hubble because of the high inclination of the orbit was very different from the space station.
Sean O'Keefe. I apologize for interrupting, but
no,
I don't want my friend Mike Griffin to get
remember that I vividly remember that Hubble needed to be serviced, but the concern was that if there was a problem, we couldn't rescue those astronauts, and the agency always has a backup plan. So if you could please, sir, tell us specifically, what is your contingency plan? What is NASA's backup plan in the event the Russians say we're not flying Americans to the space station? Tell us you have one.
Mr. Chairman, because this is a partnership, and because Russian crew members would be equally at risk, our backup plan, if you want to talk about that, would be to mutually agree that the space station and space exploration is going to come to an end.
So you have
and
no
then
backup.
we would make an orderly evacuation of the International Space Station. We have 6 seats, 6 crew members, all 6 guys. If you wanted to say what happens on a really, really, really bad day, that the nations of the world decide that we're done with human space flight, and you are forcing me into this answer, and I like to give you real answers, and I don't want to try to BS anybody. If the nations of the world decided that human exploration is done, we have the capability to bring all 6 crew members home because we have 2 vehicles, 6 seats, 6 crew members.
That are on the space station now, right? So we could wait the station if we
I don't anticipate that day is going to come. I'm not worried about getting people to the International Space Station as long as the Congress funds the president's budget at $1.2 billion in 2016, because we will have an American capability to get crews to the International Space Station. Getting them there is not the issue right now. Or getting them back.
I know we've got the ability to get them back.
Getting them there, but that's the only issue, Mr. Chairman.
I urge you, it's, I think, vitally important that NASA have the, are you making contingency plans? Have you got people working on what if?
Mr. Chairman, may I make sure I understand your question?
Yeah, so how do we get, how do we continue to, if the event the Russians say we're not carrying anybody else to the space station, your only plan is to evacuate it?
No, sir. Yeah, and I thought I might confuse people. Let's take two things.
So
How do we get, is the question, what's the contingency plan to get people to the International Space Station?
I understand
Get
we can
crews in?
evacuate folks. That's always essential. Want to make sure we can rescue people. You've got a lifeboat capability to get them home. But if the Russians said they're not carrying Americans anymore to the space program, to the space station, before commercial reaches full capability, you have no backup plan to continue to fly Americans to the space station until the commercial folks get up and running.
Mr. Chairman, that is the plan.
But
To
you
use
don't-
American capability. Mr. Chairman, there is no capability to get anyone to the International Space Station today. Well, there are two ways, but I don't use one. And that is Soyuz. That is the capability. That is the only capability any nation in the world has. So, to talk about what is the backup plan, what's the contingency plan, the backup plan, the very serious backup plan is to get moving and get Boeing and SpaceX certified so that we can fly in 2017. That is the backup plan. Had we gotten the funding that was requested when I first became the NASA administrator, we would have been all joyously going down to the Kennedy Space Center later this year to watch the first launch of some commercial spacecraft with our crew members on it. That day passed, and I came to this committee and I said over and over, if we don't fund commercial crew,
Had
it's gonna
NASA
slip.
not canceled the Constellation program, we'd be ready to fly within 12 months.
Mr. Chairman, that is not correct.
If
And Mr. Chairman, I don't want, whoever told you that is not correct.
it set us back.
Mr. Chairman, anytime you interrupt a program, it sets the nation back. So that is very true.
Yeah, regardless of who's the president or regardless of who planned it, it was just a setback.
When-
I
when-
just wanted to establish it for the record. I'm going to thank my good friend, Mr. Fatah, but it is a deep concern that we don't have a contingency plan to get our folks up in the event that.
Would the chair yield just for a real quick second?
Sure, but I'm going to go to Mr. Fatah. It'll be his time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield for a second.
Just real quick, I think we have to own the question that you're asking, that if we want those kinds of things to happen, we have to fund it. We have not funded it. I've been here 15 years. We've been cutting every year, research and development, the kinds of programs we have in NASA.
Right, let me get to, so first and foremost, just to put this in context and not to belabor it, in terms of the space station, for a large period of time, even when we had the shuttle, the Russians took astronauts to the space station. We used the shuttle to take cargo. Is that correct? As a general matter?
After we lost Columbia in 2003,
Right.
the conscious decision was made that, because the Columbia Accident Investigation Board said, get space station completed. And we worked with the international partners and decided the most.
What I'm saying is that,
Well, but we did carry crews, but we
Right.
carried the construction crews.
right,
And
but
we
the
said we
main,
would
but the
use-
main way to get individual astronauts was
Yeah.
through the Russians. And when we had the problem with the Russians and Georgia's independence and the military was there any interruption in our interactions with Russia at that time?
No, sir.
Right, and now we have this new dust-up around Ukraine, which is more than a dust-up. It's but it's a similar kind of issue. Has there been any interruption in Russia's cooperation with their part of this partnership?
No, sir.
Right, so now they've also taken a decision this week that they want to extend the life of the International Space Station. They're late to that decision, but they've said something that's useful in that regard. But in the meantime, the administration took some action, right? Because this dismantlement of the shuttle was always going to, putting the shuttle to rest, was always going to create this break in our ability, which this was known before this administration came into being. It's a worry. Right. But it's being resolved through the ingenuity of American enterprise, because the administration with the Congress has made a package of decisions about deep space, human flight, commercial crew in lower Earth orbit, and the investment in space technology so that we can keep our preeminence in space, right? So that's where we're headed. I wanted to get back to this 238 plutonium. So when we closed the Savannah plant, I'm shifting gears now. I'm going back to where we started at, right?
Sure.
When we closed the Savannah plant in '88, we got out of the plutonium business. We got to somewhere around, when you were in charge, we had 35 kilograms of plutonium. You made a DOE says we're going to get something done at Oak Ridge. I went out to visit the plant at Oak Ridge, and they have a $50 million contract with NASA, right, to do this. In the meantime, we also have a problem on the medical side of this with isotopes, which we don't have any domestic capability in this regard either. And the Department of Energy has launched an effort in that regard. So, but this is very important, because if we're going to power spaceships, we need this plutonium, right? So I just wanted to clear up the record. It is Oak Ridge, and you know, we need to keep mindful of these connections between the subcommittees, because you can speak to your colleague to make sure that that program is robust, right? So, but I think you know, we don't have to get into it. The bottom line is, we're in the lead now. Our lead is not absolute, it's relative, and if we want to stay in the lead, we're going to make these investments. Or as some of my colleagues would say, we have to spend, you know, because they get concerned we use this word investment. So spend money, because we can't lead the world on the cheap. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I'll yield back to the chairman.
Know how committed subcommittee's always been with Wolf. We've always made sure to plus up and protect NASA's funding levels. And it's, I mentioned the cancellation of Constellation. It's not political. It's a setback, no matter who's in the White House. And it's a real concern. The gap is a real concern. And I wish we did have some contingency. I wish there was some way to, for us to get there more quickly. And we'll certainly do our best to help you do that. I recognize Mr. Hunter.
Thank you, and I share your concern, but I just think that, you know, part of the problem is that we have to fund these kinds of activities, because the investment that we make comes back in many ways in terms of the return on the investment. Yeah, and I think the subcommittee, we may have to be more adamant with the process of the authorization part. You know, I'm just saying. On the international.
This is the way we're going to work this. I'm going to work hand in hand with my chairman. We're going to walk this mile together, and I think at the end of the day, NASA, one thing I'm sure of, NASA is going to be better positioned than it otherwise would be.
All right. And on that, I love Europa mission, and I think that, and you know, with that kind of probe that we want to be sending up there, we'll have new insights on how our solar systems have been formed in the environment of this icy world, and possibly even a probe for the potential for alien life down there. Perhaps not the way we know it, but there may be another form of alien life there. So the secondary payloads offer is relatively cheap, so it's a low-risk opportunities for a dramatically increased scientific capabilities of that mission. The secondary payload on the Europa mission could be used to fly through its geysers and water plumes to directly search for life in the plumes and under the surface. So what are NASA's plan to use secondary payloads on the Europa Clipper mission to hunt for that alien life?
Congressman, I am going to take it for the record to get you a formal response. However, what really excites me is the mission to Europa has excited people all over the scientific community, because the geysers of which you speak, if I'm correct, I think were first sighted by Hubble, but they are not repeated, so they're not consistent. So we're not sure that, you know, we can, if you're going to send a secondary payload in to fly through a geyser, then you need to know when it's going to geyse. That's a word I just made up. And we don't know how to figure that out just yet. So we are studying, the planetary scientists are really trying to help us understand, is there another instrument that gives us a better idea of their frequency? Because what you would like to do, and a college student could do this, was take a CubeSat. They call them swarms. So with a mission that you sent to Europa, whether it's the Clipper or anything else, you drop swarms off and they just go down near the surface. And where you would not send a spacecraft there because of the harsh radiation environment, it wouldn't survive. You send these little CubeSats through, and they take all kinds of samples.
And I hope
so
return one to Earth.
I think that's what you're talking about, and that's really exciting when you think about it. But that, again, is like everything. It comes from science and technology funds, and those are the funds that we continue to cut.
And so we need to bolster it and to be able to move forward in areas that we want to move forward on. Mr. Chairman, through the chair, NASA started a dialogue with industry about how it may transition the International Space Station from pure government operation to partial commercial ownership in its operation. Can you tell us today about what your plans are? And I understand the Russians' obligation is to 2024. So can you just give us some sort of explanation of what the plans might be?
I'll make it very quick. We were disappointed. We went out with a request for information from industry, academia, everybody that said, we would like to use the International Space Station. I mean, it's only going to be there for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
We would like for you all to look at it and tell us how this gives you confidence that you can go off and position modules or other independent entities in low Earth orbit. This is this infrastructure that I talked about. And everybody said, for the most part, yeah, nice idea, but we like going for free. We like having NASA do it, and so we're not quite ready yet. We continue to pursue that, however, because we think that with the discoveries that are being made now through CASIS and the nonprofit entity that we have put in place to help us go out and recruit people to fly on the International Space Station, that industry, academia, international partners will begin to see the value of what not flying on the International Space Station does, but what being in low Earth orbit, what being in a microgravity environment provides. And so we just have to be patient. But it was disappointing the first time we tried to do
Very
that.
quickly, in the line of the chairman's question, I understand that Russia is sort of winding up their activities in Kazakhstan as a launch area, and they're going to move back to Russia. What is going to? How does that impact our programs, and do we have a plan around that?
It's like everything else where we purchase a service. The service is getting our crews to orbit, and it makes no difference whether they launch from Siberia or whether they launch from Kazakhstan. It's a trip that the crew has to take, and that won't change. You know, the crew changes and the crew lives and trains in Star City for long periods of time, and they have to get on an airplane and fly down to Kazakhstan 3 days prior to the launch. But it's the same thing we do in America. Crew trains and lives in Houston, and they get on an airplane 3 days ahead of time, and they fly down to the Kennedy Space Center. So, but can I go back to because I don't want to leave anyone mistaken. When we talk about science and technology, and the point that you made, it is critical, and we have to find better ways to encourage industry and other entities to want to be in low Earth orbit. We're going to fly what is called a beam. It's a Bigelow. It's not inflatable. Mr. Bigelow will get really upset if I say that. It is an expandable module. This is an American entrepreneur who has had dreams of putting stuff in space for probably 30 years and has the hardware in place if we can just find a way to get it there. And so he has 2 modules that have been on orbit for more than 5 years now that were flown up on Russian spacecraft with no instrumentation. So we can look at it. We can see that they're still existing. We have no idea what's in it, whether the air is clean or whatever. We're going to take one of his smaller expandable modules and put it on the International Space Station later this year and the crews are going to be able to go in and put logistics in there, play with it, do whatever, and what we're hoping is that there will be other companies like some of these that are sitting on the back row over here, I'll put them on the spot, who will say, that's a good idea. We want to do that also, and either buy a module from Mr. Bigelow or go build their own module and put it in another orbit. It doesn't have to be in the same orbit as the International Space Station.
I think they should buy one from him. I
I'm
mean,
not
if he's
arguing-
put out 30 years of effort in it, he should get a payoff, you know. So,
I don't know whether it's
so
been
anybody who builds their own, don't come see me, you know.
He's built his own, and it's been a while. But that's what, Mr. Honda, that's what we have to do. And so we are taking the risk. We're saying we will fly you to the International Space Station, and we're going to put you there, and then we're going to work with it and see what happens. And our hope is that other companies will see that this is a potential moneymaker, and they will take it and move off somewhere else. So I didn't want to go without letting you know that we were doing things.
Thank you. General Bolden, I want to go back to the SLS because I'm
Yes, sir.
concerned about the announcement that there's been a slip in the launch date. There's been a delay. NASA's announced a delay in the second round of testing on launch abort system, and the second round of testing looked like it's going to be held in 2018. I know that the budget request that the President submitted to the Congress asks for a 12% reduction in Orion and SLS funding, which concerns me because we've obviously got a serious deficiency in the ability to reach low Earth orbit, and we certainly don't want to see any slippage in our ability to go beyond low Earth orbit, and we want to make sure the SLS program is robust, that it's achieves all its milestones. We'd like to get it in ahead of time. And could you talk to us about what is necessary? What does this subcommittee in the Congress need to do to help you get the SLS to prevent any more slippages? And what is NASA doing? First of all, what can we do to help make sure there's no more slippages? Why was the first launch slipped by a year?
Mr. Chairman, if I can address the launch abort system first, that is not a part of SLS. That's a part of Orion. And your statement is a surprise to me. I will take it for the record. I'll have to go back and find out. My impression, my information was we were getting ready to do the test of a part of the launch abort system, at least the motors, right over in a facility in Maryland sometime this year. But I will go back and verify where we are there. So that had no impact on anything about SLS. What got us to where we are with SLS today when we say 2018 is its flight, its readiness to fly, was we went through the very formal process of milestone evaluations and everything, and when that was presented to Robert Lightfoot at a formal session that we have on programmatic decision-making, then it came out that we, on our funding profile, SLS would be ready in 2018 at a certain price. And so that was the first time that we really knew for certain what its earliest launch date could be. But that's only SLS in the ground system.
Okay.
That's what we're saying.
Now, earlier, I thought I heard you say at one point that the initial launch capability would be late 2018, and then I thought I also heard you say after 2018.
Mr. Chairman, what I may have said, I may have confused things by referring to the system, and I don't talk about launch of SLS. I talk about the launch of the integrated SLS and Orion to cislunar space, and that means it's going to be EM2. So that's what, when I talk about really important dates, because that's the way we're planning Orion. We're planning a launch availability of Orion for EM2, and then we back away from that to say when EM1 can be launched. We're trying to figure out what is the earliest possible date that we can fly a human-rated mission on SLS and Orion.
And
And
when
once
would
we
that-
determine that, and that's what'll come to you all this summer.
Okay, this summer, you'll be able to tell us.
The technical term for it is Key Decision Point 2,
Okay,
Key Decision Point C, so
Okay.
KDPC. And that won't be until this spring or summer. And once that occurs, we'll come back into you and say,
Okay.
here's the finding on, here is the decision from KDPC.
And NASA's told the subcommittee that increasing the fiscal year 2016 budget for SLS would not result in an advanced schedule or reduced life cycle costs for the program, and yet you have requested a 12% reduction in funding for Orion and SLS, which seems a little inconsistent. It seems to me we're not adequately funding SLS and Orion. How are you going to manage to, stay on track if you're asking for a 12% reduction?
Mr. Chairman, we think we are asking for adequate funds. We have a schedule that is built around what comes out of the key decision point milestones. And the budget that we have in place today supports having the SLS, the launch vehicle, and the ground systems available in 2018. The present budget that we have in place today. We will have a budget for you, a budget request that will be refined next year once we get the KDPC for Orion. And I hope I'm not confusing things there, but I'll get clarification back to you.
So you anticipate you'll be able to give us an estimate of your first crewed mission by this summer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Let me talk a minute about the decadal survey priorities and see if my friend Mr. Fatah has any follow-up. We'll probably submit the bulk of these for the record. The reason, of course, the Europa mission is so important is it was the top priority of the decadal survey last decade and the second priority this decade, and is, of course, it is, as you know, holds 2 to 3 times more liquid water than all the water on Earth, and is the most likely place beyond Earth that if we're going to find life, it's most likely right there in our own backyard. That's why the planetary science community is so excited about it, and why this committee has supported it so strongly. The mission is still in its early planning phases, but I would like to know, if you could, talk to us about the decadal survey in general, and are you satisfied that NASA is following the direction of Congress and in funding and flying the top priority of the planetary decadal survey? And talk to us about some of the other decadals. And to me, that is the gold standard. That's what NASA should be flying, are the best recommendations of the best minds in the scientific community, whether it be planetary, heliophysics, earth science, or astrophysics.
Congressman, or Chairman, the best thing out of decadal surveys is the fact that it does represent the thinking of the best minds in science, if you will, out of the National Research Council in a specific discipline. And what we endeavor to do is follow the guidance of the decadal survey, and we generally try to focus on the number 1 and number 2 areas there. We don't go down deep into the list, because the decadal surveys give us multiple projects that can be flown. And as the way the planetary said this past time when Steve Squires chaired it was, in fact, he made it very specific. The decadal survey was very clear. If NASA is going to fly a subsequent Mars rover after Curiosity and it's not going to cache, then don't do it. I mean, they were very, very specific. Go to Europa. It didn't say go to Europa and do this, but we have decided that we can put enough funds in the budget to mount another charge on Mars with Mars 2020, which we intend will be a caching mission.
Yeah, the first step on that.
Samples in place for
Right.
subsequent return to Earth, and begin the formulation of a Europa mission, and that's what we're doing. I hate the term robust, but in general terms, if you look at our planetary science program, Dawn is closing in on Ceres. We are still learning from the abundance of data that Dawn gathered in its year orbiting Vesta. New Horizons is closing in on Pluto and is already imaging Pluto. We're planning a Juno will arrive at Saturn soon. And so, I'm Jupiter, not Saturn. Thank you
Yeah, I
very
thought
much.
that,
No,
yeah.
no, that's, yeah, you're right.
It's Jupiter.
But every planet and major dwarf planet in our solar system is either being investigated presently or going to be investigated in the next 2 years. I know there are people who believe we can do better than that, but I'm not sure how much the planetary science, what will make the planetary science community happy if visiting every planet in the solar system, is not good enough. We're now talking about understanding planets in other solar systems and other galaxies, thanks to the work of Kepler. So we are expanding the areas of investigation for planetary scientists even beyond our own solar system. I think that's good. I think it's great. And whether it satisfies everybody or not, no, it doesn't, and we never will. But it's like, how much money do you need? It doesn't make any difference how much money you give me. I'm going to tell you I need more.
Well, this was the first decadal survey I think they'd ever done where they used independent outside cost estimates. Steve Squires
He
was
did
very
indeed.
adamant and quite correct in making sure that we had realistic outside independent cost estimates on each one of those missions so that Congress would have a good idea of what they would actually cost. Mr. Fatah, any follow-up?
Just a closing comment, not a follow-up question. One is I want to thank the chairman, and I think the time clock thing is working, except for me and you. It's working great. No, but and I want to thank the administrator not for all that you've done in terms of space exploration, but what you're doing in terms of preparing future generations. The Space Act agreement with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, 4 million young people, 4,000 clubs all across the country, and getting these young people excited about STEM education in general, but doing that through having them learn about the exciting work of NASA, because that's how we get people who want to be mathematicians and engineers and everything that we need, by getting them excited about this. So, and as I said this to the chairman in private one day, that, all of us don't have the benefit of having, Cape Canaverals or NASA mission controls in our district, but all of us have these young people who we want to be, we want to live up to their God-given potential, and NASA is the best opportunity to get these young people excited about learning. So I want to thank you for all you've done. Thank you, Chairman. You're back.
Mr. Honda, any follow-up?
Thank you, and in the words of Lino Nimoy, live long and prosper. And if I may just ask one quick question. I was really, I know, but I couldn't resist. I just wanted to share that. I was really pleased to see NASA moving forward with the competition-based commercial cargo and commercial crew, and I think that we're really concerned about that as a group. Now that contracts with Boeing and SpaceX are in place, and there's a clear path forward to restoring domestic crew space transportation by 2017. Underfunding this program will delay crew flights and lead to continued reliance on Russia for access to the International Space Station. So, as the commercial crew providers focus on low Earth orbit, NASA would be able to shift its focus into deeper exploration of space. Can you just briefly discuss how the success of this public-private partnership is shaping how NASA would be viewing future missions to explore the solar system, and how do you envision more cooperation with the private companies to explore resources on the moon and near-Earth asteroids?
Congressman, we have always felt that collaboration with private industry and entrepreneurs was the right way to go. And commercial crew and commercial cargo particularly, has demonstrated that was in fact a good plan, a good thing to do. We are now looking at collaboration with industry and academia and entrepreneurial interest in putting things on the surface of the moon. I tell people all the time, we never left the moon. We have always been there. We have orbiting vehicles right now, but in the near future, and near is a relative term, my hope is that we will enable humans to go back to the surface of the moon. NASA doesn't have to be the organization doing it.
Yeah.
If we are implementing it and supporting it. We're going to be operating in cislunar space for 10 years, at least, when we go to the proving ground. and with multiple trips back and forth to cislunar space, I think it is inconceivable to me that we would not partner with some entrepreneurial interest or some industry or some other international partner who wants to build a rover and and lower it to the surface of the moon from the cislunar orbit in which we happen to be. It is inconceivable to me that won't happen.
It could be like expanding internet, go into space and be that kind of thing. So again, Mr. Chairman, live long and prosper.
Thank you, Mr. Honda. There is no prohibition in current law against private companies mining.
I do not, Mr. Chairman, I get asked that all the time. I need to find an answer.
I don't believe there is. I think, of course, no
don't think there is,
nation.
and that's the problem. It is, everyone is concerned, and so one of the fastest growing areas in the field of law today is space law.
Yeah. Well,
Because
no nation can claim sovereignty over a asteroid or the moon. I think
you're right.
that's, we treat it just like Antarctica. However, the.
Well, no nation except if we claim it, right?
I do think Mr. Honda raises a really interesting, good question that I think maybe in the future we need to think about NASA providing infrastructure and support to the private sector to reach out and whether it be mine resources, make those resources available as fuel stations for missions out to deep space in the same way the Highway Department provides infrastructure for commercial activity on Earth and in the future. But we will certainly do everything we can to support you, and it's a real privilege for me to be in this position to help make some of those dreams of the future of young people come true, Mr. Fatah, Mr. Honda, and something we've always worked together arm in arm in a bipartisan way. I've got a lot of questions I'll follow up with you personally on, as well as for the record, but it's a real privilege for me to be chairman of this subcommittee, and I hope as a part of my legacy that I'll working with Mr. Fatah, find a way to make sure that NASA's budget request comes directly to us. It ought to bypass Office of Management and Budget. We ought to hear directly from you as to what you need. We ought to give you the stability and the support you need to do multi-year procurement so that you can build spacecraft and rockets the way the Navy builds aircraft carriers and submarines. Mr. Fatah?
I like the way you think, Mr. Chairman. Directly to us.
We really do. We want to hear directly from you. And I hope also as a part of my legacy, our legacy together on this, I really want to see NASA focusing on those decadal surveys. I really think that's the proper guide, that's the proper map, guideline for future missions, relying on the best minds in the industry. It is the law today that NASA follow the planetary. I'd like to work with you, Mr. Fatah, on trying to expand that to help make sure that NASA is following the recommendations of the decadal survey and heliophysics and earth sciences and astrophysics as well. And when it comes to the manned program, that's a bigger challenge, is how do you do a decadal survey?
I will say this publicly, Mr. Chairman. I love the fact that there could be, a leadership role, someone on the other team that says you want to focus on science as the guidepost. So it works for me, all right?
That's it. That's my North Star, is to make sure that we're following the recommendations of the best minds in the scientific community in each one of these areas of specialty. And then also, I hope, not only to make sure that we get the SLS up and running and get commercial up to low Earth orbit, but for the long term, I just want to leave you with this. I actually really think the asteroid redirect mission, I'd encourage you to focus on the development of the next generation of rocket propulsion. That, to me, is the great value of that mission. The fact that we are still flying a rocket engine that's fundamentally been designed by Robert Goddard in the 1920s is just, I think, inexcusable. And the asteroid redirect mission, the great value there is that for these young people that NASA touches and inspires, I really hope as a part of my legacy and the time that my district continues to rehire me, that I'm privileged to chair this subcommittee, that not only will we leave Mr. Fatah and Mr. Honda, NASA with a robust low Earth and deep space manned spaceflight capability and a robotic planetary astrophysics, heliophysics, and earth science program designed and recommended by the best minds in the industry. But let us also leave for future generations development of the first interstellar rocket propulsion system that would carry us to Alpha Centauri and beyond. That can be done. It's within the realm of our ability, within the realm of capability of the brilliant men and women that work for you, General Bolden. And I, with the support of my colleagues in the subcommittee, really like you to be thinking about, when it comes to the asteroid redirect mission, focusing on development of the rocket propulsion system that'll take us to Alpha Centauri to go explore those exoplanets that are most like Earth, which appear to be far more common than we ever realized. So I deeply appreciate it. Thank you for your indulgence and the extra time. I look forward to following up with you individually and personally, as you can imagine. It'll be in great detail and very specific. I'm looking forward to coming to see you, sir, and thank you for your leadership and your service to the country, and the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
We'll leave in a second here. I'm gonna go see if we can unwind. All right, I mean, I don't know. There's so many things that need to be done. I know. That's one of them.
All right, I'm going to say something to Megan. Megan, hi.